live, Santa Monica, California. What's up, guys? How are you guys feeling today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good, dude.
Thanks for having me. And then I'm usually here working with Alex on Sundays.
That's right.
So I try to find time off here and there, but usually it's pretty consistent. I have games on the weekends and I work out during the week.
That makes sense. And you practice a lot on your own?
Yeah, absolutely.
All strictly FP, yeah?
Yeah, only FP. Yeah.
You're not benching, you're not squatting, you're not deadlifting?
No, haven't done any bench pressing or squatting in it's been at least 6 to 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and now that I've gotten rolling and learning FP techniques for the past 3 years, that's all I'll stick to.
Wow, that's so cool. When did we meet? That was in 2020, right?
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, you came in pretty early, pretty much as soon as the studio was set up again, you were in.
Yeah, as soon as I got the opportunity, I believe I contacted Nina.
That's right.
Yeah, Nina connected us, and then I came in. Probably the best decision I ever made as far as like my training and practices go.
Welcome to the Project Function podcast. I'm Mike Musiolo. With me today, I have Rodney Acero, owner and manager of functionalpatterns San Diego, and I have Patrick Rittmon, professional basketball player and longtime client of FP Santa Monica, training with senior trainer Alexandros Stefanidis. So today we're going to be talking about exercise anxiety. We're going to be talking about the reality of looking good versus doing good, objective good, and how that relates to the fitness novelty machine. So thank you guys for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So Patrick, I wanted to kind of kick it off with you, man. Really happy to have you here because Patrick started training with me in 2020, and actually there's a testimonial on our Instagram of Patrick. So Patrick, did you have problems with pain during basketball and outside of your basketball practice before you started FP?
Oh, absolutely. Especially during the year that we started, not being able to have access to gyms and workout, I did feel a lot of anxiety because I wasn't able to work out as much as I was used to or thought that I needed. But once I got here, I realized that it was the practices and techniques that I was performing that was actually causing that to happen, and put me in that cycle of pain and rehabbing that you have talked about many times. Yeah.
I'm curious, when did you first start playing basketball, and like how did that whole journey start?
I mean, not that I have memory of it, but I think 4 or 5 years old at the YMCA, my local YMCA. I started there. My mom signed me up. I was playing basketball and I believe t-ball. But yeah, so basketball was the one that for whatever reason I stuck with. I wasn't necessarily the best at it growing up. Even when I got to high school, I didn't make varsity. So yeah, just for whatever reason, basketball was just the sport that I decided to, stay consistent with.
I see. So since very young. And then,
that's so cool.
What was your so in high school? Did you play? You say you didn't make the varsity team. Did you play like at a club, or were you just playing like recreationally, or was it competitive, or was it mostly recreational?
So I played AAU basketball. So what that is, the AAU basketball circuit is you'll find a local basketball club. There's many in LA, and you'll sign up. And they'll place you in different tournaments in LA. Some teams even go to Las Vegas. And at the higher levels for these for these youth, they even travel across the country and play. So in high school, you'll see leagues like the EYBL. Those are the top athletes in high school. A lot of those players usually go on to play high level overseas, make millions of dollars in other countries like China, Spain. And some of them even make it to the NBA. But I wasn't one of those athletes.
So then, and that was during high school?
Yeah, so that was during high school where I did that. So I just practiced on my own. I would go to my local 24-hour fitness gym and play whatever pickup games that I could find. And just because I just loved to play the game of basketball. So that's what I spent most of my time doing. It was disheartening not to be able to play varsity basketball because I did want that at the time. But now that I look back at it, being very autonomous with my training and be able to just take ownership of that kind of led me to down the path that I'm on now.
And what was I'm curious, because when I was in high school, I did, I think my sophomore year was when they first started introducing weight training when I was in high school. Was that around when you were there? And did you, yeah? What was it like?
Absolutely. So my freshman year, I played football. They wanted me to play football. So we had weight training before practice every day. And I remember I'm glad you brought that up. That's the first time that I actually felt back pain. They had us doing sort of Olympic lifting, back squatting, bench pressing. And then of course they had us doing sprints and all that. That wasn't the problem, but I did feel some type of athletic gains at first. And then I remember going into my sophomore year, my back would just hurt every day.
Wow.
And at 15 years old, that's
the worst.
Yeah, that's the worst. So I tried everything. I tried stretching. Whatever the coaches would tell me to do, I would try my best to listen to it, but it really didn't work, and it followed me for a pretty long time.
You came in with back pain.
Came in with back pain, plantar fasciitis.
Elbow pain, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, elbow pain from getting shots up all the time. Knee pain from if I would try to do a 2 a day after the first workout, if I tried to go and play again later in the afternoon, which a lot of basketball players do.
Sure.
My knees would be super sore. It would take me 30 minutes to even really get going.
And a lot of people would say when you're playing at that level, that's just part of the deal. But now that you've been doing FP, you've been able to strategize more in terms of okay, I'm gonna practice this much, and even though I have a lot of pressure on me, I'm gonna recover better, I'm gonna do FP, I'm not gonna smash my spine with these lifts, and I'm gonna feel a lot better, and I'm gonna continue to get better, right? Do you feel like you've lost athletic ability since not doing the barbell training or traditional weightlifting?
No, not at all. Not even close. It's the exact opposite. I feel like I've gotten more athletic. It's easier for me to get gains with my athleticism now, even doing things like the movement elimination protocol, where I'll take 2 to 3 weeks off from basketball from time to time if I feel like my body just needs that rest and recovery, more so my mind, because playing basketball that much, you do get a sort of performance anxiety. And so if you don't take that time off, I know a lot of players that deal with it, but they don't talk about it much.
Sure. And they don't take time off, and then their performance actually suffers. They push through it, but instead of just, hey, listen, I'm gonna take 2 to 3 weeks, take it easy, focus on FP. We've talked about this before, right? Because a lot of people, we had somebody comment on the FP Santa Monica Instagram the other day, actually, and it was a good analogy. I actually respected the person because I understand that it's difficult for this paradigm shift. I've also done consult calls with people where they're like, I can't imagine not getting after it every day. But this guy's knees and lower back are getting worse and worse as the years progress. Granted, he's doing pretty good for 60. This guy was doing a consult call the other day. And it's like, well, what if he could still sprint? Right? What if you didn't need to do your stretching and Eldoa routine or whatever the case may be, and instead, you're doing FP and you just take it easy here and there and focus on that in the movement elimination protocol, and then all of a sudden you could sprint. What if that guy could play a game of basketball? Wouldn't that be worth reducing his output in the short term and consolidating his movement portfolio, right? This is what Patrick tapped into is a sense of wisdom. He saw the wisdom of FP, right? Patrick is a lot more athletic than I am, right? He's a lot bigger than I am. He looks way more ripped all the time. But he came to me for answers, not because I'm the, like I don't know how to play basketball. Well, now I'm much better at basketball. I've talked about this before, how I kind of use basketball as a way, as an assessment to see kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, he's not gauging your ability to play basketball to come to you.
Exactly.
Or how ripped you are.
Or how ripped I am, right. He's seeing the wisdom, he's identifying with the first principles, this makes sense to me, and then once he's experienced the training, he's like, this seems like the right thing. And I love your whole experience because we were talking about not playing varsity, et cetera, it made you seek out solutions, right? You were like, I'm going to find the best training so that way I can get to the professional level. And now you're playing for, who did you say you were playing? You were playing for the Flash?
Yeah, so in the TBL, I played for the South Bay Flash last year. And right now I'm currently playing for the Orange County Nova Stars in the ABA. So the TBL, that would be the third ranked level of professional basketball within America. In other countries, they have a lot of tiers. Sure. In America, it's usually, at first it was just the NBA and then the G League, which it is now. Now there's the TBL.
Cool.
So that's the league that I played in last year.
Right on. Awesome. And the thing is, with the movement elimination protocol, that, Patrick has a certain level of pressure to perform, So since that's the case, he has to search within himself and say, okay, I'm not, because we have clients that we've worked with, Rodney's experienced this as well, where they get very hung up on the fact, hey, why can't I cycle, for example, right? Luckily, Patrick, I don't think you were ever really into cycling per se, and me neither. I never understood it at all. This is just me giving my personal opinion.
I tried it.
Yeah,
and
it always felt horrible. So even before I understood the first principles, cycling was never something that I understood. I wasn't big, my dad ended up getting into surfing, and that's not something I ever really felt like I needed to get into either. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that I was ever into. But when we talk about this stuff, when talking about surfing, when we're talking about cycling, and then also just, doing cardio. Cardio is always the big one because that's the lowest hanging fruit, right? Anybody can hop on a Peloton, anybody can take a hike, anybody can all of a sudden start jogging. But 9 times out of 10, especially during the pandemic, people were like, oh, this is a good time to take up jogging, for example, right? And then all of a sudden, they're taking a jog and they end up with knee pain, ankle pain. I had somebody with a heel neuroma once he started jogging, right? Hip pain, lower back pain, right? So if Patrick had just kept doing what he was doing, there's no way he's playing professional basketball, right? In the long term, because his knees are gonna be messed up, his lower back's gonna be messed up, right? So that's why you have to look at the stuff and say, this is the wisdom aspect of it. How do I consolidate what I'm doing in order to get better returns in the long term? That's really the important thing.
Yeah, one thing with the cardio that people do, it's supposed to be very low impact.
Right.
So then that's why people tend to do it for longer. But really what that is you're just getting more room to be sloppy.
Right.
So like when you're doing something like playing basketball or sprinting, there's very little room for error there, or you can get hurt. So when people are doing something like jogging, cycling, essentially it's like it gives you a lot of room for error there, and that's what we see. We see when you see someone jogging, they don't look that good. So there's just a lot of room to be sloppy, and then over time you're just compounding. Like you might not even feel it right away when you're doing some of those things. I've seen people, even lately too, they're like, oh, I'm gonna do the 10K, or I'm gonna do the marathon, or this or that, and it's like they're able to train for it. They're like training for a couple months, but then over time you don't see people like lasting doing that sort of training. So at some point the sloppy training is gonna kind of come back, and like what you said, Mike, it's gonna people get pretty badly hurt from it. They're gonna pay for it.
You're gonna pay for it, and then what happens? People end up on a slippery slope. Then they can't really move much at all. They don't. Here's the thing too. Cardio is always it is always a substitute for not really looking at your nutrition and other behaviors such as alcohol, coffee, marijuana, other drugs, whatever the case may be. Ozempic is a good example. Imagine you have somebody who is prescribed Ozempic and then they end up having side effects. Well, let's say they lose 40 pounds and then they end up having side effects, and then the doctor says, well, don't take it anymore. Okay, well, they're going to gain back that weight and then some, because they didn't end up developing the behaviors that are necessary in order to maintain sustainable weight loss.
Yeah, to go back to what you were saying, Patrick, with feeling you need to take 2 weeks off, it's like that's what you need to do to be able to sustain what you're doing, right? Yeah. I don't know if you know, but what are the other players doing? Because I know they're for sure reaching like a burnout period. I'm guessing they're maybe doing some of the things that you were mentioning, like, right? Either having to use energy drinks or coffee to get through the workouts or through their days. Probably some sort of downer to be able to rest and sleep. Do you know what they might be doing?
Absolutely. So all the things that you've named, I know a handful of players that will use downers. A lot of players smoke marijuana. They don't see it as an anxious tendency to smoke marijuana, but now I know better. But the stretching, I don't stretch before practice. I don't stretch at all. But I was kind of looked at, how do I say it? It's kind of looked at awkwardly at first because
like you're trying to get out of it, or
yeah,
like
I'm trying to
lazy?
get out. They think I'm being exactly.
Right.
Like they think
there's
I'm
like a team conditioning.
Yeah, they think I'm being lazy. So I don't do the team conditioning. I don't stretch. They see it as I'm just trying to like ostracize myself from them. But I'm always the first one in the gym. I show up an hour and a half before practice even starts. I get a 45-minute workout in, then I do the actual team practice. I just don't do the stretching. So I'm actually putting in more work. But some people will see it how you're saying, oh, he's just trying to get out of it. When I haven't stretched in 8 years, as soon as I found out about FP, I stopped stretching, even though I didn't know the techniques, just because it made sense to me. And people always told me, oh, how old are you? I say 22. Oh, well, wait till you hit 27. You're gonna need to stretch. Still didn't need to stretch. I'm 29 now. Still don't stretch. And I feel better than I ever have.
That's the thing. It's like we're telling people not to stretch, and it's not like you're wanting to. You're like in the beginning you may feel like you want to, but like now, do you even feel the need to stretch? Like do you feel like you want to stretch after or before practice? So it's not like you're not doing it because we're telling you not to do it. At some point you realize I don't feel good when I stretch. It
feels horrible.
Yeah.
It feels horrible. And there were times when I would here's the thing, people don't know what they're supposed to be feeling. So when they do these stretches, when they do something like yoga, because yoga is just that's the scapegoat for hypermobility, right? So that's why we always bring up yoga, is because, for the most part, and you'll see these pro NBA players and they'll have the strap and they'll be cranking their hamstrings and everything like that. And it's like, well, how many of these guys have all these knee problems, et cetera, like Anthony Davis is the prime example. These guys get injured all the time. And the fact that they're so tall too, they don't catch a break, and you're running on that hard court and the shoes are horrible. So then you put stretching on top of that, it's like real problem.
Even to add on to that, even Paul George, because players have their podcasts nowadays, they want to be a little bit more outspoken. And Paul George even said that he couldn't focus on getting better in the off season for many years just because he was always hurt.
Right. Yeah.
Can't practice.
And so that's what we're saying, guys. This is the problem with injury normalization, right? Everybody's like, oh, injuries are just part of it. Well, but then why are there injuries across the spectrum? Why is the person that just decided to do a marathon out of nowhere injured, who has a mobility routine, that's done yoga? Guys, you should see the forms that come in to FP Santa Monica. Literally, they check off these boxes. It's like, what are you currently doing? Yoga, weightlifting, physical therapy, stretch therapy, Pilates, whatever, the gyrotonics, right? They're doing everything. So if this eclectic combination of stuff is not getting people out of pain, it is both your average person, right? What is Patrick saying? He's saying he had back pain at 15 years old. So why is it that 15-year-olds have back pain? Why is it that 21-year-olds have back pain? Why is it that professional athletes have back pain? Why is it that Rodney and I had back pain when we were doing yoga and weightlifting and gymnastics training and Pilates and core strengthening, right? It's because it's not working. It's because it's not working, which is why Patrick has been able to do less, right? And good for him. In many instances, we can't even train team athletes because their team and sports and conditioning coaches, they won't let, Patrick has set himself up well. At the professional level, for the most part, they'll tell you, you're doing what we tell you to do, right? It's very hard to get out of that. So he put himself in a good situation. He's very, very smart, right? But most of the time we can't, the thing, we've trained a college level rugby player, and we would train him in the summer for a bit. We would do some intensives with him, and then he's got to go back and do barbell back squatting, right? And what do you think? That lower back is going to get pumped up once again. Same thing, right? Makes it very difficult. And that's why we're talking about the movement elimination protocol. These sports and conditioning coaches don't understand, they don't buy into the biomechanics. They are doing old school training because they don't know any better, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it was really important what you mentioned about that basketball player that said he couldn't work on getting better on the off season, because what you're saying too, it's like you're showing up an hour and a half early to practice. Like you're not just, and when you say you do a 45-minute workout, you're not just like doing a workout that's gonna hurt you or that's gonna tire you out more. That's like you're probably doing something, one, that's gonna help you during practice, but two, that's also helping work on your skill level, right? Actually get better.
When I say show up to practice early and do a 45-minute workout, I'm talking about going on the court and working on skills, and focusing on my ball handling, my moves, what shots I'm going to take during the game. How
do you get better at playing basketball? Doing exactly that, right?
Yeah, that's the SED principle.
So if you can, right? so if your workout regimen allows you to do more of that, like an hour and a half, that's a lot. I mean, you're probably doing 2 a days too, right?
Yeah, I'm doing 2 a days. I mean, depending, sometimes I might even like wake up early and get shots up in the morning. So sometimes I even work out 3 times.
Like if your body feels good, right?
If my body feels great.
And you're able to sustain that over the years. And then when you need a break, you take 2 to 3 weeks, and then you can work on recovery. And then you said it was good for like in terms of your mental health or like the anxiety, right? Yeah. So that's an important thing too. So you're taking time off for that, and then you're going back at it, and you're able to like improve your skill. That's something that Johnny Eblin gets a lot, right? He's like he's always sparring, he's always training, always at the gym. And then people have no idea like how he's
training the most.
Yeah, he
has the most training volume, and that's why his cardio is so good too. Cardio, right? In other words, he's not smashing his spine over and over again, so he's able to move well, and that movement efficiency leads to good cardio.
And he's able to work on like sport-specific drills and things over and over and over, which is exactly what you're talking about. So,
right.
And then do you see like your the other players do the same? Like, are they able to?
No. So it's funny. About a month into the season last year, coach, he brings everybody into a circle. He asks, "How's everybody's body feeling?" And I'm the only one that's like, "I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good." Everybody else is, my groin, my back. They need to even take off from practice. I never missed a practice or a game. And guys had to sit out, ice, get rehab, and so on and so forth. But I was ready to go every day.
Yeah, grit can only like take you so far.
Totally.
And it's like if you're not thinking about what you're actually doing and being smart about it, which is what Patrick is doing, then you're not gonna like being hard or pushing through is not gonna get gonna get you there.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. And that's kind of the David Goggins effect where, stay hard, push through it, blah, blah, blah. Listen, too, we're on the side of like more people need to take more responsibility and have more responsibility for, setting up the circumstances of their environment to where they can change, right? People need a little bit more get up and go. So I'm all about staying hard.
Taking ownership of...
Yes, taking ownership. The whole, Jocko Willink, extreme ownership. Absolutely. Guys, if I was in front of David Goggins and I was in front of Jocko Willink, I'd be able to have a conversation with these guys. It's not that we think that they're like wrong per se, but it's the idea of abstractions. It's like, it's just, there's a TikTok of David Goggins talking to like a teenager, and the teenager's like, every time I work out, I hurt myself. And David Goggins is like, are you hurt now? And he's like, well, not right now. And he's like, well, work out. And it's like, well, that's not gonna work, right? That kid, and we get more degenerated kids than ever before because they're not eating good foods. A lot of them are vegan now. You know what I'm saying? They're being coddled more. They're doing yoga in school, right? So we have kids come in with a lot of problems, and it's starting younger and younger and younger, and it's not good. It's not good.
I've seen a very high uptake of leads, like clients reaching out or potential clients reaching out of them being younger. They're getting younger for sure.
That's
with
right.
Severe scoliosis, just all the pains, like what you said, just the pains, all of that. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring it back to, Patrick, is like what you mentioned with the coach bringing you guys in. Hey, how's your body feeling? Everyone's kind of broken. It's like they want to be doing what you're doing, right? They want to be able to show up early, get some work on their skills, then be able to do practice, go back home, feel good, come back to practice, do it again, and then it's like they want to be doing more, right? It's not like they're...
Nobody's lazy on purpose.
Exactly.
At least that's how I see it. I don't think they're being lazy on purpose. And lazy might even be a bad word for it. But if somebody could put in more work, I'm pretty sure they would.
They all want to put in more work, but they can't. It's like the common denominator there is their training. Because you're showing up to the same practices, you're playing the same games, you're doing essentially the same, except what you're not doing the heavy lifting, you're not doing the stretching, and you're doing FP, right?
Yeah.
How did you negotiate not having to do that stuff?
Started off at the first practice. On the way there, I was trying to think of a way to have a conversation with whoever I needed to in order to not have to do that. And when I showed up, I just didn't do it. I just didn't do it. I warmed up on the side doing some ball handling, so then when they started practice, I would just be able to get going. And after the second or third day, the athletic trainer, great lady, great woman, she comes up to me, she said, hey, do you want to get some of this? That's exactly what she said. And I said, no, but we can have a conversation about why I won't after. And we had that conversation. I told her that I do functional patterns, and I'm not sure if she knew what it was or not, but she gave the inclination that she did know what it was, and she respected my decision from there.
That's great. Yeah, you got lucky. You have somebody who is not...
And this is in both teams? Or are you talking about the current team that you're in now?
So this was for the TBL team, the South Bay Flash.
Last year?
Last year, yes.
Great.
Okay. And has it been any different this year?
No. I mean, I guess because I've been one of the best players on the team, on both the teams I've played on, they kind of give me that leeway. I'm not sure if I would get that same leeway if I wasn't. Because for the league I'm currently playing in, I'm leading the league in points. So the coach, there's no reason for him to mess with my routine. Yeah. And in the TBL last year, I was top 25 in scoring as well. So there would be no reason for them to mess with my routine.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is very good. Does anybody have any questions for Patrick? I just figured I'd check and see. I didn't ask them to ask questions, but I figured I'd see if anybody was curious about Patrick's routine or anything like that. If not, that's cool too, but I just wanted to check. They know a lot of people. So what Dan just said is they know people who do martial arts, and then what was it?
Overeat.
And then they overeat, and then they try to make up for it by doing a lot of cardio. Absolutely. And that's the thing, guys. You have to know how much you're eating. You can't get away with it. You just can't. And there are ways, like, listen, if I do a huge workout, I am going to be able to eat more. But how often am I going to be able to do that, right? You will, listen, we all owe it ourselves to try and be like Patrick, okay? We all owe it ourselves to try. But if you are a computer programmer that has just decided to get into martial arts at 40 years old and has never really learned how to move well, you are not going to achieve that kind of calorie burn without injuring yourself. You are just not. So you have to pull out MyFitnessPal and you have to say, how much am I eating? Right? You have to do that. There's no way around it. There's only so many hikes you can go on, so many jogs you can go on, etc. before, and especially without doing FP, before you get hip pain, knee pain, lower back pain, etc. You have to account for that. You have to account for your behavior.
And just all the extra time too. It's like,
Exactly.
do you really want to spend like 2 hours, 3 hours, or I guess like 10 hours a week or something, like just...
You know how long it takes to burn 1,000 calories? If you go on the treadmill and look at how long it takes to burn that 1,000 calories, right? And then one dinner out, you're at 12, 15. People don't know how much they're eating. I've had people be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely under 1,500 calories a day. No chance. You are not. You are not. I need to see the MyFitnessPal in front of my face, right? Because people put it in, or they put something in and they're miscalculating and they don't know it, right? They're like, oh, this amount of pasta was only 300 calories. You only ate 1 serving of pasta? Really? You know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, hopefully, I mean, we don't recommend eating pasta anyway, but pasta is something that's tough to get people to stop too, for example, right? You know, stuff like that, not eating grains, right? You tell people to stop eating grains, including whole grains, and there's a lot of pushback on that too, right? They'll start talking about published research and the scientism of it and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and usually the grains is like toast with like some peanut butter.
Yeah, toast and peanut butter. It's like that's some low level stuff right there. You know what I'm saying? And I get it, like, but there are options and people talk about the money and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you don't need to eat like, that much, or even like you should get the highest quality food you can, but it's okay if it's not the grass-fed organic, you know what I'm saying? Like at first, right? Until you get to a certain place. But the point is, you know, you want to think protein, animal products first. That's first, and people don't prioritize that. They prioritize the grains, and then that's supported by the FDA, and then who do you think all the research is paid for by, right? So it's like, guys, and also, does that person know how to read published research? They're just trusting the experts, and it's like these people do 6-week studies, 6-week randomized controlled trials, and it's like, but what about over the course of 5 years, right? And also, what does their gut look like? They're not testing that. We have people who are vegan that come in and their gut's literally out to here. And we're like, well, regardless of what the research says, there's probably something that you need to change, right? We can see from the inside out. Lots of skin problems, stuff like that, right? If you have an external skin problem, there's something going on internally that needs to be accounted for. So that's just, you know, that's a nutritional protocol, not even along the lines of like the movement protocol, which we find to be the most important thing, because mechanotransduction accounts for the most, right? And we're going to talk about more of that in another video, but we're saying that's why someone like a LeBron James, you think he gives a crap about blue light, right? Does he go outside and stare at the sun for 10 minutes every morning and make sure he gets a half hour of ground? I mean, I don't know, maybe he does, but probably not, right? And all these pro athletes get bathed in blue light until 10, 11 o'clock at night, right? In their hotel rooms and whatever the case may be. They're going, exactly, and they're still able to play pro basketball like, you know, they're the best athletes on earth, right? So that's what we're saying, is that incredible mechanics will account for a lot. It will account for a lot.
Yeah, just one more thing on the whole movement elimination protocol that people are resistant to. I had a couple clients, especially this month, we're in January, So they're like, oh, for the month of January, I'm gonna do no this or no that. Like they're fine with, it's like the timeline that they think about removing or changing their diet. Like for them a month, it's like, oh, that's pretty reasonable, right? I can take a month of whatever it is, grains or coffee, whatever they're trying to do. But then when you tell them, hey, you shouldn't do this activity or this thing that you like to do, and they're like, for how long? And you tell them, maybe try a month. They're like, no, I can't. Like I haven't done it for a week and it's been so long, or I haven't done it for 2 weeks, it's been so long. It's like, hey, but you're willing to do that with your diet, but you're not willing to do that with the movement. So that was another parallel that I thought it was interesting that I heard this.
Well, it is interesting because you have people who are quote unquote successful, and I'm like, how did you get to that point? Because change is done by your prefrontal cortex, right? And I'm not a brain scientist, but we were talking about Robert Sapolsky's book, and Robert Sapolsky is essentially a polymath. He's a scientist that observed animals in real time and knows a lot about neurochemistry, biochemistry, hormonal health, blah, blah, blah. He understands how your body works at both a cellular level, and he understands brain science, et cetera, et cetera. And he talks about the prefrontal cortex in his book, right? So what happens is if you count from the numbers 1 through 10, right? You say 1 through 10, and then your ability to start at 5 and go backwards, or to start beyond 10, for example, and then like switch up the order, or to say that, like if you say the ABCs, I can say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P. But then if I wanted to reverse that, my prefrontal cortex is gonna start working. It's gonna be like Z, Y, X, okay, and then I'm stuck, right? So this is what happened. I know I seem like I'm going off course here, but the reason why I mention that is because when you tell people to stop doing that stuff, they get very hell-bent on, well, what do I do instead? And we say myofascial release. And myofascial release is pretty easy, okay? You're laying on, I know, and there's a technique to it. You do have to build the skill. However, like Patrick, how hard was it for you to change your routine, to stop doing the traditional weightlifting, to stop stretching and do myofascial release instead, to stop the traditional weightlifting and doing, step presses, step rows, practicing these ballistic movements, working with the paraball? How hard was that for you?
For me personally, not very hard, because I was looking for a solution to what I was already dealing with. And once I got my first few FP sessions, it was pretty clear that I shouldn't be doing that stuff anymore. But I would say that without the techniques that I was provided and shown, it would have been very hard because of that cognitive dissonance where it's like, well, if I'm not going to be doing this anymore, then what are you telling me to do?
Absolutely. And that makes sense. So, you were lucky enough to be able to find a place for one-on-one training. But that's what we're talking about. We're having clients that come in that want us to solve their problems, but then they're not willing to adjust what they're currently doing, right? So, I've had clients where I'm like, that anterior hip shift is not changing. Are you still stretching? And they'll be like, well, I just do, toe touches. I'm like, we've been going over myofascial release for 6 months. Like, come on, this has to change, right? You have to set up your lifestyle to work. And especially in the beginning, if you're somebody who doesn't have a strong metabolism, you have skin issues, you don't really have a lot of muscle mass or a good relationship, we call it, myofascial skeletal organization, right, would be the technical term for this. If you're somebody who doesn't have that, right, in other words, you've never learned how to move well, then you have to do everything. The bioenergetics will matter, right, because it's going to take you a long time to build the biomechanics, right? So if you're somebody that's up until 1, 2 in the morning, and then smoking weed and drinking alcohol, and you haven't built that resiliency, there's no way you're gonna be able to come in here and I'm gonna be able to wave a magic wand and get you out of pain, right?
And it goes back to what I said with the month. It's like, I used to do long distance running, martial arts, a bunch of play soccer, and I haven't done that in 7, 8 years now.
Right.
Maybe once or twice, if that, but.
Yeah. And you don't have a lot of anxiety about it, do you? You seem okay. Rodney's a pretty relaxed guy. He's probably one of the more relaxed, not anxious people that I know. And I'll talk about my actually, because I was working as a trainer. So you could imagine, and let it be known, I was working at Equinox, and I don't want, to be clear, I had a great time at Equinox. I'm not on bad terms with anybody there. It was a great, beginning as my career of a trainer. I feel very lucky to have started there. But think about how I looked, because I looked at this 10-week course. I was asking senior trainers, because we had a Tier X, club at our gym. It was like a flagship location. So some of the highest level trainers in the company would work or go in and out of there, the people who taught the master classes and stuff like that. And I would say, what do you guys think about this? And they would have mixed opinions. But I decided, but one of them said, they were like, well, try it, but the only way you're gonna know is if you really stop everything. Stop everything and do that 10-week course the way that they're telling you to do it. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna do that. And what I noticed was I did about 2 weeks in, I was stopping everything. I was just doing myofascial release. And then I decided to do boxing randomly with a buddy of mine that we've done boxing with before. And I'm like, I'm literally kicking harder and punching harder than ever. And I feel less stiff and I feel more athletic just doing the myofascial release, right? So it's like, guys, you don't know until you really give it a chance. So in many instances, these people will trust our professional opinion and they'll say, okay, I'm in pain. And that's what gives us our differential advantage, because these people are in pain and they don't want to be in pain anymore. So in many instances, people will be like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever this guy tells me to do. For the people who have a little bit more resistance to that, I'm like, do 6 weeks. You're training with me 3 times a week. Rest on your off days. There's plenty to focus on. Get sun, get morning sun, right? Everybody's afraid of the sun. It's crazy to me. And focus on your nutrition. Tap into parasympathetic tone, do heart math, do myofascial release, do it for 6 weeks and see how you feel. And that's what Rodney's talking about. People will even be like, and that's exercise anxiety, right? Which was one of the main topics we were talking about that today, right? That's what stops people from getting the results that they need. Exercise becomes a form of escapism rather than something that's actually making you better. That's really unfortunate. But we have a couple clips that we want to play too that I think will kind of bring us into other topics. So Dan, if you don't mind bringing up our first clip.
I'm saying what I care about is the reality of goodness, not the perception of it. And what I see all over the place is people who care about looking good while doing evil. Fuck them. Okay?
Let me ask.
Yeah. A lot of virtue signaling going on in the fitness industry, right? So this is a New York Times interview with Elon Musk, and we're just kind of playing it out of context because, whatever that whole situation is, what we're saying is the reality of doing good versus looking good is not as prevalent in the fitness industry as well as society as a whole. We're going to play a couple of other clips that demonstrate that. But when we're talking about it, when we're talking about the fitness novelty machine, guys, fitness influencers will give you platitudes, okay? They give you platitudes. So for example, they'll say, all you need to do is move often, eat well, sleep well, and have friends.
Eat, pray, love.
Eat, pray, love, right? That's if you generally follow those guidelines, you'll be fine, right? And the thing is, guys, what they're doing is they're insulting your intelligence. They're playing to the lowest common denominator. They're assuming that you are not smart enough to understand nonlinear solutions to these problems, so they're giving you linear solutions. These guys got no love for you, okay? What would be a way to show love, talking about abstractions, would be giving you the right information, even if it's not something that you want to hear, okay? So that's the thing that drives me nuts, is that these people will build these followings giving people very generalized information, and that's what we're talking about in terms of the reality of looking good rather than actually doing good.
Yeah, and it's not just generalized information, it's incorrect information. It's things that actually hurt people, and that's what we're saying. Looking good while doing evil. Yeah, it sounds great to, like, all the things that you said. They sound great. It's like, okay, you're telling me to like be kind to people and don't judge and all these things. And then when someone, like, if we're trying to dissect and extrapolate like what they're actually doing, then we look like the bad guys because, like you're saying, like they're saying something that sounds good. So then when you oppose that, it's like you end up sounding like the evil person or like the bad person.
That's right.
So it's everywhere. It's really everywhere. What are your thoughts, Patrick?
That just takes me to like what I see at commercial gyms. There's a gym in particular where I go, and they have a room where they do these group classes. And it's a lot of it's a HIIT workout, and they have loud music playing. They have these black lights going, and it's always the same people that sign up and go into the class. So they have their groups, so they're satisfying that social need.
High-fiving each other.
Yeah, they're high-fiving, all that. The instructor has the mic, and like he's singing along to the music while giving people instructions, telling, hey, you're doing great, you're doing good job, high five, right? And
while the instructor's wearing like a knee brace, and they're limping to class.
Absolutely.
And then I see those people sometimes, they'll come in, somebody will ask them casually, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. My back was hurt.
Look at that.
Like, not a surprise.
Right.
Yes. And it's not that someone like the instructor may have bad intentions. One, that's how they make a living. Two, they might have, like, that's all the tools that they might have. But the reality is, like, objectively, specifically if you're in a cycling class, like, you're, like, what you're doing to people's, like, hip complexes is it's bad.
Horrible.
It's like the amount of work that takes to get someone to recover from years and years of, like, or miles and miles of biking or cycling. Like, I didn't do it that much, but I did it a good amount where on top of the deadlift and the back squats, biking, just my back.
That's the icing on the cake, man. You are asking for it. For me, it was deadlifting and yoga in combination. Yoga, deadlifting, squatting. Those three things. That's what I'm saying. So that we were those people. We are the ones on the forums. It's like, I do this, and this, because it's a imposition to say, you must be eclectic. Every modality has something to bring to the table.
It can work for any, or what do they say? It's like it works for everyone, or like,
right.
It can work for anyone.
That's right. They're saying that just because it's easily accessible, that it must work.
Or just because it doesn't work for you, doesn't mean that it doesn't work for anyone.
Oh,
that's
yes,
kind of what
that's what we get a lot. People will be like, well, this might work for them. It's good that you found something that works for you, but it's like what we're talking about humans. We're literally talking about the evolutionary biology of humans. So it's something that's probably going to work for all of us, right? And here's the thing, everybody is very idiosyncratic. Yeah, the way that I cue Patrick is very different from all my other clients, right? Especially ones that have a lot of hypermobile, hyperflaccid tendencies, right? It's very different, right? And that's why we talk about, you may as well get into training professional athletes as opposed to your average person. Patrick is a piece of cake to train. Patrick is easy to train. There are things that we have to account for to make sure that he's performing at a high level. We're gonna have Alex Stefanizis on the podcast eventually, and he'll talk about that. But Patrick, of course there'll be moments where it's like, okay, he's not feeling this as well as he could be. And yeah, maybe he's played really hard, and he may come in and he's like, I'm feeling great. I got a little bit of hamstring tension, things like that. We do have to work through things, but the thing is, we're always able to get to the other side of that, and it's much easier with somebody like Patrick, who's been playing basketball since he was 5 years old, right? Getting someone like me, who had never played basketball until he was in his mid-30s, to be able to play basketball well is much more difficult, right, than somebody who has experience in many sports or whatever the case may be, right? Or
also the genetic capacity that he has.
And then there's a genetic capacity, that's right.
But yeah, but comparatively, like an athlete versus someone that has done tons of yoga, tons of cycling, getting them to even like hinge and feel their glutes, it's like comparatively, it's just
whoa,
1,000 times.
I cannot tell you how hard it is. I can't tell you. I'll give you an example. I want to talk about 2 examples quickly because my parents are always good examples, and they're the best of all time. I'm very lucky that I have rock star parents. But one, my dad actually, we were talking about group fitness, and he taught group fitness for a while at Gold's Gym. And during the pandemic, before that actually, I had started doing FP, and I didn't impose anything on him. They're always curious about what I'm doing. So I was telling them about it, and he said, oh, so when I'm having people in my classes do squats and stuff like that, I'm actually hurting their backs. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so when then I'm having them lunge without rotation and the other things that you're saying, I'm hurting their knees. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And then over time, he didn't do it immediately, but he started including, like in his sports training class, he was able to include a lot of FP elements. He had me help with programming and stuff like that. But kudos to him, because it wasn't long before he was like, you know what? I'm just not going to teach it anymore. Forget it. And he dropped it. And this is somebody who's in their mid-60s, and my dad is a sports phenom. He could play literally any sport growing up, and he's in tremendous shape even now at 67. We actually really focused on corrective work last time I was there, and my dad was literally like draining baskets, and me and a buddy of mine played with him, and he literally almost beat us both in basketball. It was completely insane because he's a legend. But then my mom, so talking about the group fitness, that's with my dad, but my mom, doesn't have like that level of movement ability. She kind of lost that as she got older, and she ended up having very severe back pain. And by severe, I mean she couldn't stand for more than a few minutes at a time without shooting nerve pain down her legs, right? So when I was working with her, it wasn't until just recently that I was able to essentially rehab her to where she could start weaning off medication in 10 days because we're doing all the right medication. Now, she does respond fairly well to the training. However, it was my level of ability working with people in chronic pain. She was very afraid to move. And we had to figure out, okay, is this a residual that we can work through? Is this natural? Is this? Are we doing it wrong? Does she need to anteriorly tilt? Does she need to posteriorly tilt? That kind of stuff, right? There's a lot more questions. There's a lot less room for error with somebody like my mom than there is with Patrick.
Yeah, if they've been eating grains, all of that, you gotta take into consideration.
Absolutely. And that was the first thing she did, which I was extremely proud of her for. She was like, not that she drank like a ton or anything like that at all, but she would have like a glass of wine a night and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes she would feel like she gets dehydrated, and it's like, well, Mom, now's the time. And she did it. She was like, because she was in a position. So she dropped it. She made sure to start eating well. She started getting outside more, getting sun, prioritizing that, doing bone broth, like things like that. And it made a big difference for her. And then it was time to get the mechanical stimulus that was actually going to heal her. And she's doing much better now.
And these are things that need to happen in order to get to the result. So kind of leading into the next video with, when we talk about dysfunctions, or we talk about things like grains or removing certain movements from your protocol, it may sound like it's bad, or that we're trying to impose our beliefs or our preferences, but we're really just trying to do what is going to get the result. Like what you mentioned, Patrick, leading scorer, top 25. It's like you're able to keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
Absolutely.
Not just because we thought it was. It's not like suddenly we went with that randomly, right. and then the marketing is working, so we're making money off of it. So now we double down on it, and then now it's like, oh, you're in pain. Oh, don't tell anyone. It's like your people feel it, and that's why it's also have you told like people about, or like your teammates about FP?
I mean, I'd shout it from the hilltops if I could. I've told a good amount of people about it, and there's always an ego involved, especially if they do make money off of training. I've even had conversations with people that have offered to train me, because one thing I know this about myself, about my basketball game is I'm not the highest flyer, right? So they were telling me, well, if you trained with me, I could have you dunking in a year and a half. And I mean, I can already dunk, but it's not like, a John Moran or something like that. Right. But I told him, I was like, you know what? I was like, we'll make a bet. I was like, I will do what I'm doing, and I will just simply work on dunking for, I think I gave myself 3 months. And I was like, I'll be able to do a windmill or something. And I think it only took me a month and a half. And then so it took me half the time to gain the athleticism that I needed for that required bet, which was just an ego thing between two people.
Sure. Because what's required for you to do that? Is it like necessarily more force output? Maybe, but there's also like a skill involved, right? Like your body, you have to position yourself in a way that's going to give you the right leverage to suspend yourself in the air and then do so. And isn't that what you do at FP?
That's all we focus on at FP. That's all we focus on.
And what I was gonna say with what were we talking about? You telling your teammates about it. It's like we don't have to. It's like it's not like for me specifically for my gym. I don't do much marketing. Like I don't have to. Right. People come in. Obviously FP does their marketing, but people come in and they tell their friend, and then that friend comes in and they tell their friends, and then have one client that he tells his brother, then he tells his mom, and it's like. We don't have to impose things on people. It's like we're going to tell you what you need to change in order to get the results. And then once they do and they get the results, it's like they're just telling everyone about it. So yeah.
That makes sense. Let's play the other video. We have a Bill Mayer clip that's very funny that I'm very excited about.
Mr. Beast is the most successful YouTuber ever with over 38 billion views. Feel old now? Anyway, he takes some of the money made from 38 billion views and plows it back into doing things like, this year, partnering with a group of doctors to provide cataract surgery for 1,000 blind people that restored their eyesight. Cool, huh? Wrong. He filmed their overjoyed reactions, which to many made him a performative altruist. A Washington Post reporter tweeted, "What truly needs curing is society's view of disabled people." And BuzzFeed agreed, Mr. Beast seems to regard disability as something that needs to be solved. Okay, disability is something that needs to be solved. This is also the National Institutes of Health, which last year proposed to amend their mission statement to exclude the word disability, saying it, quote, could be interpreted as perpetuating ableist beliefs that disabled people are flawed and need to be fixed. Let me take this moment to go on record. Folks, if I am ever struck blind or deaf or paralyzed, don't praise me, fix me. Don't sit around talking about how much I'm just as good as you. Fix me. Do something. Use AI. Invent something. Steal body parts from a pet cemetery. Steal stem cells from a frog. Whatever it takes. Gene sequencing, robotic eyeballs, harvesting clones, inject me with hamster platelets, grow a new gallbladder from impossible meat. Just do something.
Yeah, that's funny. Grow a new gallbladder from impossible meat. That cracks me up. That's very funny. I mean, yeah, for sure. But I think what he's talking about is really important there because, imagine that's what we're talking about. So when we're saying, don't do traditional lifting, don't do this, et cetera, it's like it's not, We're not trying to do performative altruism here. You know, when we show these results, when we show people with neurodegenerative disorders, you know, improving their movement, when we have somebody who's 65 years old with a severe scoliosis and back pain and has had many back surgeries doing much better, or if we had somebody that used to do a lot of powerlifting and their spine looks absolutely destroyed and then, you know, they're doing FP and they look a lot better, it's like, well, that's what we're talking about. It's once again, it's the doing objective good rather than looking good, right? If we wanted to look good, what we would say is, yeah, just do FP with yoga, do it with weightlifting, do it with whatever you want, right?
People would still get some decent.
For sure, people would do okay with it. They would feel better. But if you want the best results, you know, you want to think of it as a recipe, right? So if you're making a cake, right, you can't just put garlic in your cake, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't do it.
Especially with baking.
Yeah,
you have to be
very precise, right? You know, it's just, you can't just do whatever you want in order to get the result that you want out of the recipe, right? So that's how I think of it, is we're telling you the recipe.
When you when at the end you get a shitty result, or like the recipe, like it doesn't taste good and no one likes it, when you chose to use those ingredients, and you chose to alter the recipe, exactly.
Patrick followed the recipe and now his output has increased, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. And Patrick has more pressure to perform than your average person, right? So you would think his exercise anxiety would be much higher. But the problem is that people are insecure, right? They're very insecure. They're afraid they'll gain weight. Once again, you have to focus on your nutrition. And then not only that, the bioenergetics matter too, right? You know, where you carry fat and whether you carry a lot of subcutaneous fat or visceral fat or whatever the case may be, you'd be surprised if people get sunlight, they typically do a lot better with however much they are currently eating in comparison to if they're very pale and stay indoors all the time. You know, they usually have a tendency to gain body fat, right? So that's the thing. It's like you have to understand, we're talking about real holistic training, right? As opposed to holistic training is usually like account for the emotional, right? And it's like, it always becomes this very abstract thing. We talked about that on the previous podcast, right? The emotional trauma healers have a tendency to not really solve problems, right? Because they never get to the whole point of building resiliency to trauma is building resiliency to trauma, right? Is by building a structure that can handle a stimulus, because that's the thing. It's like somebody who doesn't have good mechanical resiliency, they're going to be traumatized by everything, right? As opposed to, you know, somebody like Patrick or somebody who is as relaxed as Rodney can handle more stress and can respond to stress better than your average person, which is really the goal, even more so than at what I would recommend reprioritizing and thinking, how well do I respond to stress rather than how quickly can I get a six-pack, right? Which most people don't achieve anyway, right? To be fair, the people who are running 5 times a week, they're not the ones with six-packs. It's usually the athletes who actually know how to rest well and blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Or there's a genetic predisposition. They don't have to do that cardio, so they don't, right? Usually it's the people who do cardio 5 times a week that are like carrying a little bit more body fat and seem very anxious and aren't getting the results they want, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like if someone is doing a lot of cardio, it's like, it seems like, okay, if I just do a little more, I can get away with drinking the beer. Or if I just do a little more cardio, then I can get away with eating the sweets. So you end up not getting the result because that's just it's almost like that's the behavior, right? That's the mindset.
Most people can't handle the stress of the cardio. So they do the cardio and then it's a stressor, and then in response to that stressor, they end up eating more, right? And I challenge my cardio guys to look at this and really and think about it and say, you know, next time you do cardio for a long period of time, how much do you eat for dinner that night, right? Or my fasters, my intermittent fasters who don't eat breakfast, and I'm not saying that that's bad in every instance, that's not what I'm saying, but a lot of people that I know like to do the intermittent fasting stuff. They don't eat breakfast, they drink 2 cups of coffee, and then by 4 o'clock, and then they try and hammer cardio, and then by 4 o'clock, they have eaten, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 calories, you know, in one sitting, you know, because, you know, they'll go out to dinner or something like that. I mean, no way. Yeah, not going to work. Doesn't work that way.
I will say the diet was, for at first, that might have been the hardest part, just because convenience. Because other foods like grains and stuff, it's everywhere. So in order to not eat those things, you really have to be very particular about and very cognizant of sticking with it. So not being able to, oh, I'm just gonna go pick up something on the way home, and I actually have to, when I get home, you have to cook something, or already have prepared something later in the day, because you know when you get home that you're gonna need something to eat. So I could see how a person that, you know, works 8 hours a day every day could, you know, fall into that routine very easily without having guidance from somebody like you two.
It's a good point.
Convenience is a big thing for sure.
And it's a great point, because convenience is why people like to do cardio, because it's low barrier to entry. That's why people do marathons. That's why people do, you know, all this other stuff. The group classes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Pay $10 for the gym membership, go to as many classes as you can.
It's being penny wise and dollar foolish. So I pay $10 for this group class as opposed to paying the $250 for the 10-week course, and I end up long term destroying my joints and never learning the correct information, right? Or I decide to, you know, I did a consult call with Mike from FP Santa Monica, and I would rather just do my routine and keep doing what I'm doing, as opposed to listening to what this guy has to say. And now, even though I could have done one-on-one training, my knees are getting worse, my lower back is getting worse, I have to stretch more than ever before. And instead of consolidating my movement portfolio, now I can't get after it anyway, right? So that's what we're saying is, you want to be careful being penny wise and dollar foolish, is what most people are. I don't want to focus on learning how to cook, right? So instead of doing that, I'm gonna reach for the grains or the Cliff Bar or the pita sandwich, you know, whatever that everybody thought was healthy for so long, right? And I'm just gonna do that because it's $5 and it's right here, as opposed to, you know, I'm gonna order Butcher Box, which is a lump sum, even though, right, with Butcher Box you get, I'm not trying to plug Butcher Box, but I'm just using it as an example, but they are great, so I do like Butcher Box, because it's like $12 a ribeye. Wow, amazing. But even that's more than what a lot of people are willing to spend, right? But I'm just saying, instead of doing that and researching and figuring out and learning how to cook with tallow and using the right pan and blah, 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 I would rather just go for the easy way out or the linear solution, right? And that's what we always talk about. And I say it with my clients, and there are some clients who get it, but I don't know. I don't know if there, you know, Patrick obviously gets it. When I say it's a linear solution to a non-linear problem, I'm still getting this. I feel like it's flying above their heads a little bit still, you know, which for me, it feels very straightforward.
Same thing with the convenience. When people are looking at Instagram and they see, here, just do this stretch for sciatica, or do this movement to open up your hips. Same thing, it's like, okay, it's there, it's free, it's accessible, so then they do it, but you're paying the price. You're gonna pay the price later for it. Versus if you do something like the 10-week course, like Mike said, you pay, and it's not even $250, $200. If you catch it on a sale, it's under.
They do sales all the time.
All the time, it's like closer to like $150 or something like that.
That's right.
And you're just getting, for a whole year, like, I think the calculation is like $2 a week. I forget how cheap it is, but it's like,
So cheap.
Yeah, it's the convenience and like setting time. It does take a little bit of like structuring, like, okay, where am I gonna do it? I gotta get this equipment, but it's not that hard. Like once you, it's like, it's not as easy as again, just looking at Instagram and getting free techniques or signing up for a group class, maybe it's not as easy as that, but it's not that hard.
100%. And that's challenging that prefrontal cortex, guys. You have to develop that ability to say, I'm going to do this for myself, and I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do and because it's going to help me in the long term, right? And that's where I agree with, like, you know, David Goggins, whatever, blah, blah, blah. People should be doing things that are harder, but they shouldn't just be doing things that are harder for the sake of them being hard, right? It was like his training with Tony Ferguson this time around, and like, you know, whether or not, I don't even think Tony did a bad job or anything per se. I'm not even saying that, but ultimately, it seemed clear to me that training didn't end up carrying him over the line. So if you didn't get the result that you want, what's the point of going hard for the sake of going hard? You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's not how Johnny Eblin trains, right? Johnny Eblin is doing skill work, right? He's got 2 world title defenses, yeah? There's a reason for that, okay? So that's what we're saying in terms of the difference between going hard for the sake of going hard and doing things that are hard in a way that they challenge your belief systems, and you're using critical thinking and you're expanding and developing your prefrontal cortex. There's a difference. So Raphael asked, does circadian biology play a role in what now? Does it play a role as a pro athlete, and does Patrick play late night games?
Absolutely. So as far as my schedule, when I wake up, usually I wake up before the sun is up, and I'll go get a workout in. And after my shower, rest for a little bit, I do make sure I go outside and get morning sun. And as far as the late night games go, when I have late night games, I make sure I show up early enough so I can work out. And usually, because a lot of my games are on college campuses, so I will go outside. They usually have some type of grassy area that's in the sun, and while the other team is warming up, or even while my team is stretching, I'll go outside and I'll ground and I'll get sun there. So I do try to make sure and be very cognizant of getting sun throughout the day. Yeah, I feel like it helps me a ton with my sleep, with my energy levels, and yeah.
Is there anything specific that you noticed doing that versus before you started doing FP and playing games?
Absolutely. So it's easier for me so the feeling of having to warm up, I guess, kind of went away with the movement protocols. And then also, obviously, you're in the sun, so that's heating your body. And so as soon as I get on the court, I feel like I'm just, ready to bounce around and spring and run.
Yeah, I mean more specifically with the circadian rhythm stuff, like I guess kind of things you mentioned, like sleep and energy, and were you drinking like also like coffee back in the day and stuff?
So thankfully I never was a coffee drinker or anything like that. So I did not have to deal with that as far as my personal experience. But just feeling tired throughout the day, I found that getting more sun, the more sun that I get, I don't feel very tired. I do take naps sometimes, but I don't feel the need to nap as often. So I will say that. So getting more sun, that circadian rhythm, and really focusing on that definitely helps in day-to-day activities.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's influencing his mitochondrial health, which is really what we're going for. So that's why he's saying he's experienced an increase in energy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if Patrick wasn't doing that, he would still be experiencing benefits. But there are people who come in that need to do that stuff first before they can make change. They need to, they would still get results, but it's helpful. I mean, we're talking about people who are very degenerated when they have a lot of chronic pain. If you have a high level of chronic pain and it is not getting better at all, like it is not resolving, it is not healing, it's like that grounding, the sunlight, stuff like that, it will only help, right? So it's just helpful. It's just going to speed things along. You want your cellular biology to be, you want to increase your you're putting you're putting gas in the motor basically, and that stuff is just super important. And Johnny Eblin will attest to that too. You can see on his Instagram that guy's getting sun all the time, and he's outside all the time.
And it's not just like you're not just doing this necessarily, or it's not just going to benefit you right now while you're playing, but what happens after you stop playing, right? You don't want to, like your life doesn't stop after you stop playing.
That's the main reason.
Yeah.
So you're already mitigating the effects of whatever you're putting your body into for when you stop playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when we look at guys like LeBron, that longevity, even though he's a genetic specimen, he's one of one. But being able to strive for that kind of longevity, because he could play until he's 50 from what he looks like. But I feel like if more people were implementing what you guys were mentioning, that the true holistic training.
Yes.
I feel like that could actually be something that people could actually strive for instead of just looking at it in awe. It would be looked at as a goal. So
Absolutely. Because that's what it is he's not looking at just his athletic performance. The athletic performance is a byproduct of doing all this other stuff. Got it. So he's saying that these people could be elite.
This is from a skills coach. It sounds like he might be a skills coach, I'm assuming, because he's saying his athletes. So I'm assuming he's training basketball players and they're going to their respective teams and they might be getting injured, therefore not being able to train as much like we talked about with various players. So I mean, just trying to have that honest conversation and at the end of the day, doing what's best for you. I'm not sure if it's high school, because in high school I'm assuming it'll be really hard to have that conversation, because when it's a teenager talking to an adult, obviously they're going to look at you, you don't know what you're talking about, I've been around longer. So just trying to really have that honest conversation and even showing the results. If you're doing FP, show the results page, and just really ask them to look into it and reconsider what they're having you put your body through. Because at the end of the day, it's your body. You're going to be there for however long. If it's high school, college, 4 or 5 years, you're out of there. They don't care about you after that. So just do what's best for you. That's the best advice that I could give.
Yeah, and then show them this podcast, right? You show them this for sure. And then I think if they're in high school, I think the parents being involved, if the parents are involved in getting their kids doing FP, and then they're able to support them in that conversation, I think that may help. But yeah.
That's great. Let's do, if there's one more question. Great question. So she asked, how do you get someone who's scared to do releases or do exercises, things like that? So, I would say that one thing that's good is you have to make them tap into parasympathetic tone. So that whole thing in the, you breathing basically, right? Deep breathing, right? I always recommend just like a box breath. Usually what happens is people will lay down and breathe, and I'll be like, just breathe normally, and they'll be like, right? They can't even they can't use their diaphragm, they can't breathe into their ribs, they can't control their breath at all. It's like, well, if you can't do that, then we're gonna have some problems, right? And here's what I'll say. If somebody gets super confused easily, that's also a sign that they're not in parasympathetic tone, right? I can, like Rodney, when I'm talking to Rodney, it's very clear, it's very direct. I never have a miscommunication with Rodney because he's always chilling, right? He can always hear what I'm saying because he's not in a state of constant anxiety. And I can say this because my mom, she understands this about herself initially, but I had to do that breathing with her. I expressed to her how important the heart math was and stuff like that, and she started doing it, and she was able to be better with the training. At the same time, you do have to communicate that they have to be better about discomfort. So if they don't like doing the you as a coach have to set it up for them to where the myofascial release isn't like killing their shoulders or their neck and stuff like that. If they're releasing their quads, or you can do the release on them. And that will help them tap, and you want to really ease into it. You don't want to go too hard on them right away, right? It really, The thing about people like that, you have to be extremely precise with your stimulus, right? And then at the same time, there's a certain amount of discomfort. Like my mom would be like, okay, I feel better. I have a little residual here. I'm like, cool. For where you're at, spinal stenosis, hip arthritis, blah, 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 that's okay, right? We don't want to normalize residuals, but there is a certain amount of conditioning that somebody like my mom is going to need before it's like, oh yeah, after every session, I don't feel any discomfort and I'm completely fine and I feel great, right? So you also have to communicate with that person to help them become more aware of what they're actually feeling and being comfortable with that. So that is the biopsychosocial model. And that's what physical therapists talk about, but then they just don't give good mechanical stimuluses, right? They just think, oh, I'm just gonna ease this person back into, they should just not be afraid of walking, blah, blah, blah. It's like with my mom, it was like, no, mom, you shouldn't walk as much right now, like at all. And then sure enough, without walking as much, 5 days later, her gait is like completely different walking down to the pool. You know what I'm saying? Like completely different.
But that's not the only thing you did. You didn't just tell her to stop walking.
Oh yeah, right, exactly. I'm giving her a mechanical stimulus that is relevant to her gait mechanics.
That's improving how she walks.
Intrinsically, right. So, and she couldn't hold core tension, blah, blah, blah. So you have to make it so basic, insanely basic. You have to bring it, so that's what we're talking about, guys. That's why when you see the results on Instagram that only get so much traction, it's because the reason why we're showing that is because if you gave me Jimmy Butler, I could make him better easily within 10 days too. You give me Jimmy Butler for 10 days, it'd be a piece of cake. You know what I'm saying? No problem. He'd be way easier to train than my mom, right? And don't get me wrong, my mom was great to train. She was wonderful. But if you gave me Jimmy Butler, that's easy.
How long did it take you to get out of back pain?
Completely, probably about a month. But yeah, I mean, we're me versus Mike's mom.
Exactly.
So yeah,
that's exactly what we're talking about. You know, and don't get me wrong, now I do feel like, okay, I'm at a skill level where for the most part, if people follow the movement elimination protocol and, you know, aren't vegan and aren't, you know, they eat animal proteins and they get decent sleep and they don't do a lot of drugs, you know, for the most part, I can get people out of back pain in about 6 weeks, right? In about 6 weeks, you know, their back pain will have significantly improved. But Patrick, yeah, a month is insane. Some of the decompression stuff that we do and blah, blah, blah. And then just not doing traditional weightlifting is big for him.
And one more thing I'm going to say about that is what you're saying too, you're kind of alluding to your execution, but it's also like we're trying to get the client to execute the technique to help them. So when you're saying like, okay, she felt a little bit of a residual thing, partly is what like your execution, but a lot of it is how much she's able to actually execute.
With what I'm telling you.
If she was barely able to like move and was very afraid to move, and you're trying to get her to create movement that's gonna like get tension in her body to be able to like get her out of pain, it's gonna be very difficult for her.
It's the way she's moving why she has the residual. Exactly. It's and that's why when so that and Patrick will know when we're coaching him and other people, I'll be coaching people and I'll be like, hey, you're gonna do this, this, and this. Stop. Okay, you're gonna do this, this, and this. Okay, yeah, I literally am that intense because then they're like, oh, I feel this. Maybe it's something I'm like, no, actually it's because it's the way that you are executing it. And there's a certain level of response. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect by any means at all. But I'm just, you know, there'll be times when it's like, okay, we had a residual there, we need to do this instead. So that does happen.
No one is. It's just more so for people that don't know what we do, haven't done FP and don't really know what we do.
Right.
It's like, and also when we say like, okay, do FP, it's like the amount of stuff that we do within FP, it's just like, it's so much.
The variables we're counting.
The variables is just, there's just so many. So it's not like we're putting everyone and doing the same exact thing.
That's right.
We're trying to execute the techniques to the person or like to whoever we have in front of us, but then that person needs to be able to like actually execute the technique, and that matters a lot as well. So and that's why it's much easier to train an elite athlete when you tell someone like Patrick, getting to a hinge or do a hip flexion chamber, it's like they're already doing most of it. It's just gonna tweak a little bit think here, a little bit here, and then it's like, how does that feel? I was like, oh, it feels great. It's like, all right, that was good. Is that kind of how it
I
is?
still remember the first flexion chamber that Mike took me through, and after the muscular burn was so intense, and I asked, I said, how much weight is on there? He said he looked at it, said 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and I lost my stuff. Like it was, and it was probably at that moment I realized, okay, I don't need to do much else.
Because it was like more intense than like probably doing some squat, or like you probably had to put some like, what, 10, 20 times more weight and do way more reps.
Way more reps, and then obviously there's far less cons to it. Like there's no of that longitudinal compression on my spine that was causing that pain. So yeah. And I can actually feel inside my body how it applies to my sport.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, people talk about sport-specific training. I mean, what could be more sport-specific than basing your training around walking, running, and throwing? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what are you doing? You're throwing a ball in a basket, you're running up and down a court. I mean, I don't know. Changing direction, I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get it. But, you know, that's going to change. You know, that will change. People will be on board. This is the future of training. So if you're not on board, get on board. Don't wait. Don't miss the train.
And then the last thing I would say about that is, just because you don't want to be an athlete, just because that's not your goal, doesn't mean that this is not going to apply to you too. It's like being healthy is being more athletic. So if you're able to be more athletic, not maybe at Patrick's level, but again, across that spectrum, it's like you're going to get the energy that you need. You're going to feel limber, not need to stretch, all the benefits that we've talked about.
That's right. The stuff that the training that I do that helps athletes become a better athlete is what helped my mom, you know, heal her spinal stenosis.
Yes, the exact application looks very different.
Yes.
The principles are still the same, but it's still the same thing.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Patrick, it was amazing having you on.
Thank you for having me.
But we'll probably have you on again in the future, actually. That was very good. Rodney, thank you so much for coming down. Dan, I want to give a special thanks to Dan, our tech man. He's awesome. And so what I'll say is, guys, this is Michael Musiolo with the Project Function podcast, reminding you to think intentionally and not habitually. See you next time.